Yes, it is a rather busy day for all of us, and particularly the people of Griffith. But it's really important that we come out here and show our support for the reef. So thanks to all of you for coming out. You're part of a national rally today. We've got thousands of people around the country standing up for our reef, and this is exactly how change happens. It's when you have the courage to stand up and speak out and say, actually, I would rather our reef be there for our children to see and our grandchildren than to have, as Liam said, a few mostly overseas owned mining companies get even richer. Well, I couldn't agree more. We've seen in the last few years the reef's really up against it, and it's funny because it's such a beautiful big place that I think for a long time people have thought, well, it's World Heritage, it must be protected, it's safe, there can't be anything threatening the reef, surely we wouldn't do that to our most beautiful biodiversity icon. But sadly, in the last couple of years, we've seen millions and millions of tonnes of dredging, which is where they dig up the ports to make them deeper so that the big ships for coal and for gas export in the main can get in and then ship it on out. Massive amount of dredging, more than 100 million tonnes, and then more than 50 million tonnes of offshore dumping of that dredge spoil. So they're digging it up from the harbours and then they're dumping it back out into those World Heritage waters. Now, that probably seems crazy to you, it seems crazy to me. The reason they do that is because that's the cheapest option. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority have laws about when they're meant to grant permits, and the laws say that offshore dumping is meant to be the last resort. They're meant to look at all other options, land-based disposal, sometimes coastal reclamation. Offshore dumping is meant to be a last resort, but they have never refused permission for offshore dumping because they've had massive political pressure and pressure from the big mining companies themselves to make it easier for these big mining companies to sadly just make more and more profits in the face of threats to the reef. So it's been a really stressful time for the reef. We've had the international community come out saying, guys, you're putting the reef on the path to World Heritage in danger listing. That would be a tragedy for Australia. Not only would it be a massive embarrassment for us, because the only other countries with sites on the World Heritage in danger list have good reason for that. Afghanistan, the Congo, Yemen, you know, they've got much bigger problems than Australia faces. We should be able to look after our reef. So we would be, it would be just such an international embarrassment to have the reef on that in danger list. And if you look at the facts, there's 12 ports in the reef already, so it's already up against it. And yet there's 5 more planned, either new ports or expanded ports. There was a report that was put out late last year that said actually we're not even using those 12 existing ports to their full capacity. They're only being about 2/3 used. So why the hell are we building more? I just don't understand why the reef is getting put last and those 63,000 workers, mostly tourism workers, some sustainable fishing outfits, why are they getting put last? We've got the most beautiful living thing on our doorstep. The largest living organism that can be seen from space is our reef, and I know as a youngster I spent quite a bit of time on the reef and it was a really formative experience for me, and I want my little girl, who's 4, to be able to go there and see it in all its beauty and to not have to go to the far outer reef to see what was once this colourful paradise for all to see. And I want to just say how delightful this little girl is at the front with her Nemo painting on her face. My little girl can't be here today, but she's always carrying a Nemo poster. And it's for these guys that we're doing this. The reef's there for us all to see. Thank you. What will we leave for our children? That's exactly right. The reef's there for all of us. It's there, obviously, for the beautiful creatures that live in it, but it's our responsibility to caretake it. And I'm really embarrassed that we've seen, sadly, under both big parties, this trajectory of damage to the reef and this mass program of dredging and dumping, effectively turning the reef into just a highway for coal and for gas ships, and a rubbish tip for that dredge spoil. So we've been working in Parliament. We'd like a bit more company from the other parties, but I think that's where you come in. If you can keep pressuring those big parties to do better on the reef, then we can start getting some outcomes in the law and force these companies to comply and make sure that the reef will be protected. So in the last Parliament, I introduced a bill to reflect the recommendations of the World Heritage Committee, who said, don't put any new ports in the reef, don't expand the existing ports if you're going to stuff up the World Heritage values, and just stop approving everything until you've actually finished your long-term plan for the reef. Eminently sensible recommendations and totally, non-political recommendations. Do you think the big parties said, fine, that seems reasonable, okay, we'll just press pause until we know what we're doing and we'll just constrain these ports and make sure we're not massively expanding? No, they didn't touch any of those recommendations. I couldn't believe it. So it was left to the Greens to bring in legislation that said, here are these really strong, non-political recommendations that just want to keep the reef in its protected state and not have it put on that international list of shame. And we didn't get any support for that bill. I was absolutely incredulous about that. But we don't give up, and neither do you. So in this new Parliament, I'll be reintroducing that same bill, and we go back to Canberra tomorrow, in fact. So we're sitting again come Tuesday. And I'm going to be introducing that bill again this week to speak for all of you and for anyone who's visited the reef and loves it, like you all do, just to take that very basic step to say, don't touch this place, it's too precious to lose. So I'd really like the help from all of you in these intermeeting days. If you've got 5 minutes, can you send an email to your, ideally your senator and your local member? If you don't know who they are, just Google them, they'll all come up. You've got quite a few representatives, far too many politicians, most people would say. But those people are meant to represent you, they're meant to listen to your views, and if there's enough of you that share that view with them, that you want them to save the reef, and you want them to say, vote to save the reef, then that can be really powerful. So I'd love it if in the next few days you can send an email, talk to, write a letter to your local newspaper if you've got time for that, talk to your friends. Let's build on this momentum. We've seen a real kicking off of this campaign in the last, it's been on foot for a few years, but I reckon the last 6 months we're really hitting our stride. And there's people all around the country that just can't believe what's happening to the reef, and that's really powerful. So I hope that we can continue on this track of people speaking out, and I am hopeful that we will save the reef. The World Heritage Committee is due to make its decision in June about whether the reef will get put on that endangered list. So the next few months are crucial. And I hope that we can prevail upon any good sense of the other parties to just put the reef ahead of those interests of short-term mining with the tiny amount of jobs compared with the reef tourism and fishing jobs, and just with the beauty of the reef. So I wanted to say thanks for coming out here today. We're not going to stay for the march because we've got to get back to the polling booths. The reef's a big issue in Griffith. I'll just leave you with one last thing. When we've been door knocking for this by-election, lots of people have raised the reef, and they had a community candidate forum the other night, and people were asking about dredging and dumping. Now, even a year ago, people didn't know what dredging and dumping was, and they didn't know the reef was under threat. So this campaign is really building momentum. We can win this. It's just so important that we do. What a shame it would be, what a criminal shame for this to be the generation that trashes the reef. Not on our watch, not on your watch, it's not going to happen. We will save the reef with good-hearted people like June, who walked all of those hundreds of Ks, and I was honoured to join her for a very tiny bit between Mackay and wherever we ended up. It's you big-hearted people that can make the difference. So thanks for coming out today. You're part of many, and we will save the reef.